right. Welcome back, TBE Network. We are sitting today with Neil Eliason of Veza Properties. I hope you guys enjoyed our podcast with Dave Senka, the founder and CEO of the Business Exchange. If you haven't checked that one out yet, you can go check that out on all of our channels, on our website. There's a blog post, all of those good things. Neil, welcome to the TBE podcast. How's it going?
Yeah, all good. Thanks very much for having me.
Awesome, man. I'm excited to dive into Veza Properties and a bit of your background, but maybe to kick us off, you can just kind of give us a bit of information about yourself, where you started out, and what led you to Veza Properties in this day and this age.
Cool. Okay. I think start from the very beginning.
Yeah, definitely.
I think from a young age, I always knew I wanted to be in property. I never knew how or in what area, but definitely property. I used to design my bedroom, make little floor plans and move my bed around. Never always worked out so well, but then was obviously in school.
Yeah.
And when it came time to studying, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. Again, knowing I wanted to be in property. I considered engineering, architecture, but I think I spoke too much in class to be accepted into any of those. And then it was about 3 days before registration at UCT closed. I heard about a degree called BSc Property Studies, which was basically everything I was looking for in a degree. Started doing that. I loved every second of it. I did my honors. And during my honors, I decided that I wanted to kind of experience it from the practical side. Just going back. Every single Saturday, we used to look, myself and my dad, we used to look through the property papers and scout, whether it was to move homes or it was just what interested both of us.
Yeah.
And we landed up, doing this quite obsessively and started picking up, good deals, seeing what lasted on the market, what didn't. And eventually we landed up we started off buying a small property, a really rundown property. It was a small, I think it was a 90 square meter apartment in Sea Point. That we had identified as a good opportunity.
Right.
And then during my honors year, I spent my time renovating and flipping the property, and it actually was a great success. So we started doing that
Awesome.
a couple more times,
and
absolutely loved every second of that. But then I thought it was time to get a job. So I started exploring my options and really just trying to meet people. And at the same time, I figured, a move to Johannesburg might be quite a good option. Just purely from speaking to people based on the network, based on the pace of Johannesburg, it intrigued me quite a bit.
Right.
So I booked a one-way ticket to Joburg. I crashed on my friend's couch, and I decided to try and meet anyone who would take a meeting with me. Not necessarily an interview. I just wanted to meet whoever I could. So I printed a whole bunch of CVs in my folder, and I just started meeting people. And from there, I landed up meeting a company called Mafadi Property Management. I mentioned them now. You'll explain why later. And got my first job with them.
Awesome.
But ironically...
How old were you?
I was about 23 at the time.
Okay.
And in my first interview with them, they'd actually told me that my CV had reached their desk 4 times, just because I went out and I met whoever I could. And they were all passing my CV around. And I think that... immediately said a lot about the property industry. It's a network-related industry. A lot of people know a lot of people, and just through that, I landed up securing my first job there.
Awesome.
I landed up in the property management sector, which I had no idea what hit me. It was chaos from minute one till the end, but I loved every single second of it. I was doing inner city property management. Mainly responsible for the Maboning precinct, managing that from the buildings to the body corporates to the streets to the events, everything involving that. And then we landed up managing for 1 or 2 listed funds at the same time.
Okay.
So I really got the exposure of kind of almost like a startup development company, managing for them as well as an income fund. From there, one of the funds that I managed with, the asset manager left to start his own private fund. And I landed up joining him, and together we built quite an awesome business. We started out also in a city, but then we later spread out to the further regions of Johannesburg, Pretoria, and ultimately Cape Town.
Okay.
We then established a management team. We got involved in acquisition and development, a bit of everything, a real like all-rounded experience, which was awesome. And then eventually, like kind of any entrepreneur, I decided it was time to kind of go on my own.
Sure.
The only problem was I had nothing really lined up at the time. And then I got back to the drawing board. I just started taking meetings with whoever would meet me. And I actually landed up in consulting, using the experience that I'd gained. I felt like I had like quite a lot to add, especially in the management side. And landed up scoring a gig in Denmark, consulting for a property company in Denmark,
Sure.
which was one of the best experiences that I've had.
Right.
I was there for about 10 weeks. I could have stayed a lot longer, but I had my wife back home. So I landed up coming back and again, continued consulting and actually landed up getting back in touch with Mafadi Property Management, consulting for their company. And really, I spent quite a bit of time looking into the various sectors of their business and where I could add value. The biggest difference is that when I'd first joined them, they were more of a startup kind of company, and now they had built it into a full-blown beast. Probably the biggest affordable property management company in the country.
Sure.
And during that time, as I said, I was looking through the various kind of sectors of their business and identified, through reading articles, the affordable sales side. When I say affordable, I mean sales around and below the 1 million rand mark in the residential space. I was reading articles about, the government grants that they're offering, FLISP as an example, that the banks were hungry, they were giving 100% bonds. And, I think both myself and the MD of Mafadi, we really identified a niche in the market, or a gap, should I say. And that is specializing in the sub 1 million rand market, where we are today. We, it's not the sexiest place to be. We're not doing these massive high-end Houghton residential, but we're really focusing where the market is active and really the market that represents kind of South Africa, and that's the affordable space. And that's
Veza.
And that's how Veza was born.
And how long has Veza been operating?
So we started out kind of early-ish 2020, so relatively new. And then it was kind of during lockdown, as soon as we hit level 3, that we decided to turn this into a proper business. We set up our offices I set up a desk. I had a hot desk at the Business Exchange in Rivonia Road, sorry. And we grew from there.
Brilliant. So, I mean, just as a great segue, maybe you can give us some background on how you started with the Business Exchange and how the Business Exchange, you grew within that environment and scaled up, and how that process worked and how it looked for you guys.
Cool. So, firstly, it was a very easy progress. And I think that was one of the biggest advantages and why I ultimately chose the kind of co-working space, especially in extremely difficult times being COVID, definitely, where you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I started out a one-man desk, quickly got a couple of agents on board. We moved into an office where I had about 6 seats to kind of suit our needs. And within 6 months, we were ready to grow. And we took up new offices upstairs, a 10-man office with the boardroom. And at the same time, we brought our partners to the Business Exchange because it was just working so well. And one of the biggest advantages, especially for a startup business, is that there's no setup costs. So your furniture is there, your internet's there, you've got a secretary. So really in an environment, being COVID and, where the economy is tough, keeping your expenses low is essential.
Right.
And, it helps you budget because your utilities are fixed. It's included. My parking's included, my internet's included, and it really helps me allows me to kind of control my expenses and and as I need to grow, there's space for me to grow. It's very flexible. I can move, I can expand, I can shrink, and that for me is just really
that's
useful.
Incredible that you've started early 2020 and you've expanded to this. I mean, it's a testimony to Veza itself, but also how the TB kind of team and the spaces kind of grew with you. And going back to Veza, maybe you can give us some information or give us a look into the process of how a buyer or a seller works with you guys. What makes you guys different other than sort of, just being really focused on that sub 1 million rand mark in residential property?
Okay, so I think I'm I can confidently say there's a couple of reasons.
Okay.
And that's for the buyer and for the seller being the individual seller, as well as like developers. We like to work with developers and kind of sell out or hopefully sell out, their blocks, their developments. And that's for a couple of reasons. So I think the first is going back to everything I told you about my past, is that myself and my partners, we truly understand the affordable market, the sub 1 million market. We understand it inherently.
Right.
The one thing I didn't mention, when I first moved to Joburg, I was living in Cape Town, I was living in Sea Point, I was walking on the promenade. And when I moved to Joburg, I decided that if I'm going to experience it and really understand it, I must do it properly. And I actually landed up moving to the CBD.
Okay.
I lived in the CBD. I didn't have a single friend come visit me in 3 years. I thought I was absolutely nuts. But I think, so that's the start, is that like both myself and my partner, we really have a fundamental understanding of what the buyers need and what the sellers need to do to get those buyers.
Right.
So what we do, we spend quite a lot of time with the developers and advising them, the shapes of their unit, the size, the amenities that the buyers really look for when buying a unit.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
so that's just from my side. From the actual company, I think I kind of compare it to the South African banking system almost, is that we've got one of the most advanced banking systems in the world.
Right.
And I don't think that that's because we've got smarter people than the United States or anything like that. But, we were kind of late to the game and we adopted their policies, but we were able to implement new technology. Whereas the American banking system that I use as an example, they are so entrenched that it's very difficult for them to adapt these new systems.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the same for Veza. Because we're young, because we're new, we're innovative, we adapt the newest technologies. So yes, we learn a lot from the various estate agencies who've been doing this for 100 years. But we've implemented a whole bunch of really cool systems, one of them being a CRM system, which really manages our leads, our deals, just better than you can do it on an Excel
Right.
spreadsheet. One of the biggest advantages of that, as an example, is like, let's say you're a developer and we're selling 100 units for you. At any stage, you can log in as the developer and see the status and the progress of each and every single deal. You don't have to ask for a report. You don't have to wait for your conveyances. So that's just one thing.
Sure.
Another thing is, really being able to analyze our data better. So we can see which banks are lending for what type of unit, what rates they're giving. So we know immediately who to approach. So from a technological side, I think we also offer nice things like, free valuations from the comfort of your own home, like obligation free, where guys can video call us from their house, take us around at whatever time suits them, and we can give them a valuation on their property. Whether they're interested in selling or not, we're happy to advise.
Wow. Okay.
So cool things like that. We really try and just be ahead of the game as much as possible. And then, but really the most important thing for me is my agents and my team. I'm not a salesman. I have the property experience, but the guys that we are hiring are people who are in that market as well. They understand it fundamentally. Again, we're not here trying to sell a 50 million rand house because we don't have that understanding of what the buyer needs and stuff. Our sales specialists are knowledgeable and well versed in that segment, and we can offer our buyers the right advice and show them the property that really will suit their financial needs, their physical needs. And
Sure. Okay. And maybe you can, I don't know if I know how to ask this correctly, but maybe you can give us just from your perspective in that sub-million rand market. Obviously, that's where you guys are operating. That's where you said the market's most active, I guess. What does the residential property market look like at the moment in South Africa, kind of in this COVID time that we're in? I know that's such a broad question, but maybe you can give us some insight into things that you guys are noticing and seeing on your side.
Well, I think without running too deep into the numbers, I think it's pretty standard across the market at the moment, and that, unfortunately, along with the rest of the economy, a lot of it is struggling, but particularly the upper end of the market. As soon as you hit your 3 millions, your and above, it really is taking a bit of a beating.
Okay.
That being said, the sub 1 million rand market is really thriving at the moment. As I meant, for reasons I mentioned previously, guys are getting the bonds they require. Governments are offering subsidies, which you can put towards your bond, towards a deposit, towards your conveyancing fees. And it really is moving. A lot of the market, that's about 70% of the market at the moment.
Okay.
Also, the majority of your buyers at the moment are first-time homeowners. And typically they will start out in the smaller place and ultimately grow into their bigger space. So that sector of the market really is moving, and it's moving brilliantly at the moment. And I think with interest rates specifically where they are, a lot of guys are looking to buy rather than rent at the moment.
Sure. Okay. You mentioned earlier about making that move from Cape Town to Joburg, and I guess my question is maybe twofold here. Joburg obviously appealed to you. The pace of the city, the energy. What would your advice be to someone maybe young, maybe they haven't studied, maybe they've just come out of their degree, looking to start a property business? Would you say go work for a property firm and get that experience under your belt? And further to that, would you say, where would you suggest someone sets up their headquarters? I mean, is Cape Town a thriving property space, or should they move to Joburg? Is it a personal thing from your side?
So I'll start with the first part of that question, is kind of the advice for someone who wants to start out in the property industry or property business. And this was the same advice that I was given, which to this day has been the best advice that I received. When I was, meeting all those people in the very beginning when I came to Joburg, I was fortunate enough to sit in a meeting with Brian Azizalahov, who was once upon a time the CEO of Redefine.
Okay.
And he was asking me what I was keen to do, and I told him that I wanted to be in development. I saw that as the sexiest part of property and really like what I've always wanted to be. And he said to me, and again, it's stuck to me, and this is the advice that I give to everyone. He said, if you want to be a good developer or a great developer, you have to start with property management, which was exactly what I didn't want to hear, because property management is the least sexy part of property. Right. It is the hardest. And again, that's ultimately why I landed up going with Mafadi Property Management.
Okay.
And the reason for that, he gave me an example which didn't really sound too brilliant or anything at the time. And he gave me an example. He said, right, you're a developer, you want to put up an office block, and you give the brief to your architect, who brings you this magnificent design, this office block with a triple volume entrance with a beautiful chandelier hanging, and it looks grand and it's magnificent. But until you've been in property management, you don't stop to think, who changes the light bulbs?
Right.
And at the time, again, it didn't sound like anything.
You're like, whatever.
It couldn't be more true or more valuable. Then what are you going to do? Are you going to budget renting scaffolding every few months for a light bulb to change, or are you going to wait till 4 or 5 light bulbs are out to make financial sense? But then your building's going to look shabby. And again, I think this applies to anything, is any business really, is understanding the fundamentals first, and you get that from management. I think, but the difference with property is that you're dealing with really big numbers. So a small mistake can be a very, very costly mistake. So again, while it is not the prettiest place to be, it is hard, it is chaotic.
Yeah.
Property management, you will get, and that will help you buy your first bachelor unit or start a business. If you go into a property and you can pick up that maybe there's damp on the outside boundary wall.
Yeah.
When you have an understanding of property management, if you buy into that scheme, that down the line there could be a special levy that's going to come and hit you, and you're going to have to put in 50,000 Rand, which you might not have. So really, it's that. And in terms of location, I think that's up to you.
Okay.
For me, it depends what industry or what sector of property. But for me, I really just loved the pace. I loved the network. I loved the energy of Johannesburg. I'm a Cape Townian through and through. I was a self-declared beach bum when I lived in Cape Town. But that's all dependent on you.
Awesome. Well, Neil, it's been great chatting to you and finding out a bit about yourself and Veza Properties. Thank you so much for being on the show. I hope all our listeners enjoyed it. Maybe you can just leave us with some words on how people can find you, contact you, maybe like your website, email.
Okay, cool. No, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here, and
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
No problem.
We Veza Properties. Our website is www.vezaproperties.co.za. We're on all forms of social media. You You can find us on the regular platforms, Property 24, Private Property, and all of that. And yeah, we hopefully we can do stuff together with any of the listeners.
Yeah, man. And yeah, thanks once again. And everyone, if you haven't checked out last week's episode with David Senka, go do that. And we'll see you at the next one.
Great. Thank you very much.
Cheers, man.